Shalom, Kahalo Yahweh, Bahashim Yahushai, Bahashim Rakakwadash. Double honors to the elder apostles and elder bishops of the GMS, including the elders that came before them that taught us his truth. And shalom and salutations to all the brothers out pushing the word in truth and in sincerity, the hopeful elect tabernacle of David. All right. I'm Brother Yahshua back with the WW3 Daily Update. Shalom and salutations to you as well, and we're going to keep this as short as humanly possible. All right. So, yeah, there's no turning back. All right. This thing is just going to escalate, and there's no peace, and we'll get that. Let's get that. We'll get that on the way out and just keep it short. Isaiah 13:7. Behold, I will stir up the Medes against them, which shall not regard silver, and as for gold, they shall not delight in it. Okay, behold, I, the Most High, Yahweh Bahashim Yahushai, will stir up the Medes. Okay? Medes are the Russians against them. Them is Babylon, also known as the United Snakes of America. So the Most High is pushing these two to go to war, and no one can turn it back. Okay? Listen carefully. I will put the Medes in motion against them. And the Medes cannot be bribed. Okay? Arouse the Medes. Stir up. Basically, stir up. Okay? Put them in motion. I'm going to awaken the Medes, to inflame them. Okay? Do we see that happening right now? Do we see somebody provoking the Russians and leaving them no choice? And they can't be bought off. They're going to go straight into war. Let's listen to this man, John Mearsheimer. Okay, this is 6 hours ago. The Russians have a very powerful sense. Let's listen to what he had. Now he's going to say, first word out of his mouth is the Americans. I thought this was the Russians against the Ukrainians. No, he's going to speak of the Americans, Babylon the Great. He's going to speak of NATO. NATO and EU is the beast, along with Babylon the Great. Now listen to the language that he uses. He's going to say, the Americans are just provoking the shit out of them. Now, the Americans provoking Russia, that's the Most High stirring up the Medes, making them mad beyond control, leaving them with no choice, okay? Listen to the choice of words.
The Americans take a bomber and they drive it right up against the Russian coastline in the Black Sea. This really bothers the Russians.
It really stirs them up. I'm going to start it again. I'm going to try to let it play through without commentating. Okay, so he's not describing the cover story, which is, oh, Ukraine, which is part of Russia, is fighting against Russia now. He's coming out and saying what the Bible is saying. All right?
The Americans take a bomber and they drive it right up against the Russian coastline in the Black Sea. This really bothers the Russians, unsurprisingly. So what you see happening here is the Russians have a very powerful sense that NATO is moving eastward. NATO is moving right up to the Russian border, mainly by turning Ukraine into a de facto member of the alliance, but also with provocative measures like this British destroyer and this American bomber.
Provocative measures. That's the Most High stirring up the Medes, leaving them no choice. No, you can't buy us off. We're about to fight. No, there's not going to be there's no negotiations. That's over.
The Russians, as Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, said, reached the boiling point. They had it. They had it. They're not interested really in negotiating anymore. They're interested in altering the status quo. And the end result is you've had this massive military buildup, which is doing enormous damage to the Ukrainian economy, which was already a basket case before the crisis. So Ukraine's situation is getting worse and worse. And the Russians have sent a very clear signal to the West that if they up the ante, they meaning the West, if the West ups the ante, the Russians will up the ante.
They can't be bought off with gold or silver.
Again, Ukraine is not becoming a part of NATO. So that's where we are today. We have this major crisis, which goes back really to April 2008. That's the genesis, that decision to make Ukraine part of NATO. And then you had the crisis break out 22 February 2014. And over time, it was ameliorated somewhat, pushed to the back burner, I think one could say. And then all of a sudden, it broke out again. Now, is there any hope that we can settle this crisis? I'll tell you what I think the best solution is. I think it's an obvious solution, but I think it's politically unacceptable at this point in time. The obvious solution is to turn Ukraine into a neutral state.
Okay, and what is that? Peace and safety. How can we not escalate this thing into mutually assured destruction? We got to wave a white flag and say, you get this, they get that, and let's come to a compromise so that we can have some peace and safety. All right?
More or less a buffer between Russia on one side and NATO on the other. This is effectively what you had up until February 2014. Ukraine got its independence when the Soviet Union broke apart in December 1991. And from December 1991 until roughly early 2014, there was no real problem with Ukraine. The United States and its allies were not fighting with the Russians over Ukraine. There was a verbal dispute going back to the April 2008 Bucharest summit, but there was no crisis because Ukraine from 1991 to 2008, to 2013 was through 2013 was a.
All right, Salaki. So I wish he would have continued on, but that's enough, right? That's enough to explain, Salaki, okay, that the Most High is stirring up the Russians against who? The Babylonians, right? The beast, which is NATO and the EU, and the Babylonians. Right? This is the whore of Babylon is the one riding on the back of the beast. All right? And there is no compromise. They cannot be tempted or bribed with gold. Tempted by silver or bribed with gold. Can't be bought off, and there is no peace and safety. Will end on peace and safety. And this is just, an update of where we are with the war. And this is 6 hours ago. All right. 1 Thessalonians 5:3, for when they shall say peace and safety, like he just said, then sudden destruction comes upon them. So lucky. Then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. Let's read the NLT. When people are saying everything is peaceful and secure, with a buffer zone, you get this, we get that, right? Quid pro quo. Then disaster will fall on them as suddenly as a pregnant woman's labor pains began, and there will be no escape. This is what's going to happen. What? Sudden destruction. Destruction will come on them suddenly. That's where this thing is going. Okay? All right, just a quick update. We'll see you tomorrow. We hope that the elector edify you, brothers and sisters. With that, shalom.